Hi, Commissioner Jawed Ashraf. Thank you so much for joining us from Singapore. Just the evacuation and the plans, which start on the 7th, I believe, by flights. 5 flights in the first week are expected from Singapore in this massive operation that India is carrying out.
Yeah, that's true. First of all, good morning to you in Delhi. And it's just about noon here in Singapore now. Yes, we are now in the process of organizing the repatriation flights, the evacuation flights, as you might call it, which is supposed to start on the 7th. And we don't have the exact flight schedules yet. This is still an evolving process, as you can imagine, when you're trying to coordinate flights from several countries with several thousand people coming in the span of a few days at just a few locations. So I think it's an evolving process, but we are geared up here to begin the process of evacuation from the 7th. We
Hi,
hope to be
Commissioner.
able to do that, 5 flights in the course of this week.
Yeah, just to clarify, of course, the distance is too long. This is being called, the operation is being called Vande Bharat, but there's the Samudra Setu also, which is involved with the Indian Navy. Now, that's not going to be part of the evacuation operations from Singapore, right?
That's correct. We only going to have flights from here, and that's partly because I think the numbers aren't that large. We are looking at about 3,500, but also because it would entail at least a 4-day journey from Singapore to, let's say, Visakhapatnam or to Chennai.
High Commissioner, again, you mentioned that figure of 3,500. That's what is the figure that the High Commission is giving in terms of the Indian nationals who've registered, whether they're students, whether they're workers, whether they're migrants, whether they're tourists, whether they're business people, right?
Yes, that's correct. And this is a process we began actually in early April of anticipating that either there would be a point when evacuations will begin, but also for those who would need assistance from us over here in the meantime. So we've gone over this exercise a number of times. As of now, we have about 3,500 registered with us and expressing an interest in going back to India.
And again, the numbers that are coming out from the mission are about, say, the whole of April, maybe 4,800 Indians who have tested positive for corona, but most of them are mild or
Yes.
mildly infected.
Yeah, that's correct. And here we are talking today now about 6,400 Indians as of 4th May
Right.
who've tested positive for COVID-19. And almost, well, I'd say above 90% of these cases are Indian workers who are living in purpose-built dormitories for foreign workers, or in other kinds of dormitories outside these purpose-built dormitories. When I say purpose-built dormitories, these are dormitories which are very large. They house on an average about 5,000 to 7,000 workers. Now, all of them are actually in fairly mild conditions at the moment. Singapore government has moved quite aggressively and proactively in terms of addressing this spread of infection among the workers, is testing actually quite rapidly, and which is why the numbers have shown up so dramatically in the last few weeks. Those who are sick have been taken care of. Others, they've been put into isolation wards. Those who are healthy and are required for essential services have moved to new locations, and they are in all these dormitories observing social distancing measures. In addition, I think Singapore government has repeatedly assured the workers that they will get the employers to pay their full salaries. They will get 3 meals a day. They're getting full medical support, conveniences like masks and gloves and sanitizers and thermometers. And they've even been given SIM cards and enhanced
Wi-Fi.
broadband in order to be able to seek content while they're isolated in their rooms or they're in a lockdown condition. The community has also stepped up in a big way. They're providing a great deal of support, not just the Indian community, but I think the entire Singaporean society, to foreign workers in the dorms. And we have also been working with the Ministry of Manpower and other agencies of Singapore government, as also with the community, to provide whatever support they require from us.
What happened vis-a-vis Singapore, High Commissioner, in terms of for a long time it was held up as the blue ribbon, so as to
Yeah,
speak, even though it's a small
right.
city country, island country as well. Was it just that the testing started moving into what these dormitories that you're calling, which is basically low wage migrant labor?
Yes. So, well, actually, I'd say that there were two different dimensions to it for the increase in the numbers that you've seen here. Initially, of course, as you know, it was held as a gold standard. And actually, till when they had their first case on January 23rd, and by the beginning of March, they just had about 106 cases. By 30th of March, that number had gone to about 950 or so, nearly 1,000 cases. And the reason for that increase was on account of the returning Singaporeans and permanent residents, mostly from Europe and United States, and also Australia and some from India and other places. But these are people who came back. Many of them brought the infection over here. So the numbers in the month of March increased on that account. In April, it has almost entirely been due to the spread of infection among workers. Naturally, they live in large dormitories in very close proximity to each other, and they say the infection spread from one of the shopping centers and a couple of workplaces. And because workers come from different dormitories to the same place, they tend to then carry infections to the different dormitories. However, of course, the government, as I said, has been testing quite rapidly over here. And by the end of April, and in fact, I would say till the end of this week, the numbers have already begun to taper off. So, average daily number of new cases in the dormitories is showing a declining trend, as also in the community. From an average of about 23, it has come down to a single digit now. The number of unlinked cases or new unlinked cases on a daily basis, the average this week is half of what it was the last week. So you can see on all these three parameters, that is the average number of new cases per week in the dormitories has come down. The average number of cases outside the dormitories, that is in the larger community, has come down to half, as also in the case of unlinked cases, which is actually the worrying part mostly when you have a significant number of unlinked cases. But that also on a daily average this week has been half of what it was the previous week. So I think they see signs of success, but the circuit breaker measures remain in place until June 1.
The circuit breaker, you're talking about the local guidelines for the lockdown.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
there's strict SOPs that are involved in the evacuation, which have been issued both
Right.
centrally and by the missions across. So you'll be looking at they have to be asymptomatic. They will be given
Yes,
kits to travel, etc. If you could give us a
yes.
little bit more detail.
Well, of course, I mean, we've got very clear guidelines both from Ministry of Home Affairs as well as from the state governments. As we begin the process of evacuation from here, we will also have to ensure that these are consistent with the guidelines over here. So, we're getting support from Changi Airport. We're getting good support from Ministry of Transport and other agencies of Singapore government. But we have to be sure that there is not excessive crowding, that the passengers arrive in in a phased manner. There's adequate amount of social or physical distancing between passengers. There's going to be, medical screening. It's not a test, but, the usual test for symptoms. Before departure, they'll fill out their declaration forms that they would fulfill all the requirements of quarantine and other measures that Government of India would have in place for them. And those who are going to have symptoms over here obviously will not be boarding the flight. And those who are asymptomatic will be allowed to board. And we're also putting out the guidelines that they'll have to, and the procedure once they arrive in India, that which means the kind of medical screening, the quarantine requirements, and future testing as the government prescribes. So this is an exercise which has begun with a rather short lead time, because for understandable reasons. But I think both the central government and the state governments are gearing up well to support this really massive exercise from across the world.
The focus, because of the numbers, is of course the Gulf, but there are so many areas that we've seen what's happening or going to
Yeah.
happen in Malay and Maldives as well with the two Indian naval ships. Singapore, like you're pointing out, once they come back, you're talking about, say, the 14-day quarantine period, which
Yes.
they'll have to go through and how they get back home,
Yes.
etc. But just to talk about what the mission and you and your staff have been
Mhm.
doing on the ground in the run up to this.
Right.
Now, it's both psychologically, communication with them. You've been working on, say, food packages being
Yes.
delivered, etc. A little bit more on that
Yeah,
acquisition.
so we've got, as in any other places, there are a large number of Indians who are stranded here. They came on short-term visits. There are workers who've got laid off. There are a large number of students whose courses have ended, who are unable to sustain themselves here in the current environment. There, we even have 55 priests who came for a function at a Hindu temple over here. It's a very old historic temple, and we're
Over
in
50
touch
years
with
old.
with them as well. We've got people who are as professionals who've lost their jobs or who want to return to India. So there are a large number of very diverse set of circumstances in which people are wanting to return. There, even students who are minors here, they're studying in the schools over here. So what we've done all along is that right from the beginning we began the process of registration. We've kept helplines available around the clock. All of us, including myself, answer emails and WhatsApp messages personally. Sometimes the people simply looking for assurance in a state of anxiety. So when they hear directly from us, and when we are spending a lot of time speaking to people, calming them down, reassuring them that the government hasn't abandoned them, explaining to them the circumstances in the country, in India, and why it is so difficult at that particular stage to evacuate them. So one of that, communications has been an important element of our outreach, and it has to be consistent, it has to be constant, and it has to be a message of reassurance and confidence building. We have also, appointed a couple of professional counselors, because there are a large number of students who complained about feeling isolated, depressed in these circumstances, as you can imagine. So while we talk to them, we've also enlisted the support of some professional counselors to counsel them in these situations. We have provided accommodation and food and medicines also where people have needed them. Now, food, we have done it in two ways. We have also made arrangements with a number of Indian restaurants over here for delivery of food packages to their place of residence. Some of them have actually wanted to come out and have the opportunity to walk out of their place of residence and pick it up themselves. There's a large number of students who live together and they prefer to cook. So we've arranged for dry ration to be delivered to them at home as well. Because here, home delivery is working actually quite efficiently. You're also allowed to go out and pick up food from restaurants. So, that's not a problem. There have been people who were here on short-term visits who have chronic illnesses, who need medicine. They ran out of them. So we've actually arranged medicine for a large number of people from India through courier services, which
Sure.
still run. But we've also guided them to doctors here who've provided, pro bono and sometimes very subsidized rates of consultation, and we've helped them to procure medicine. So it is, whatever the needs, we try to find a solution to it while they are with us at this point. So part of this is, as I said, constant communication with them. The worst thing that you can do in a situation is not find answers to your questions. And even if those answers are not something that leads you to believe that you're going to be back in India next day or so, but some way of a positive reassurance, but also meeting their needs of, as I said, accommodation, food,
Yeah.
medicines, so on and so forth. Yes.
And it was a very delicate situation which you had to handle when 9 Indians were who died there,
Yes.
not of COVID, but you still had to arrange for
It
their
is,
last
again, I
rites.
mean, Singapore, for example, is a place where a lot of people come for medical treatment as well.
Yeah.
We've had, at least a couple of cases where they died while they were here. They couldn't go back. So we've had to work with Singapore government and other agencies to get the requisite permissions for the performance of last rites over here. There were a couple of burials for Indian nationals or Muslims. And then we have had about cremations for the others. All of that has gone off very smoothly, very promptly, because one of the things that you have to deal with after a person dies is whether you can perform the last rites quickly. And it is sometimes a very tragic situation to be in for those who are unable to say goodbye to their dear ones or to be there for the last rites. Actually, you see today, you also have the reverse situation, where there are a large number of people who are residents in Singapore who have lost their parent or lost a sibling in India, and they were unable to go back. But I have to say that most of them have been remarkable in their sense of forbearance and patience and acceptance of the situation, because there can be sometimes nothing, I mean, bad enough to lose a parent or a sibling, but worse not to be there for the last rites.
And as you were pointing out, Ambassador, it's a two-way street between India and, in fact, when you're talking about Singapore, whether it's outsourcing of PPE and other equipment from Singapore-based companies, whether it's testing kits that have been sent, and on the other side, India providing much-needed medicine, which you pointed out, which may be only for Indians, but also now you're talking about HCQ and other medication.
Yeah, you're right. So we, of course, have a great relationship, India and Singapore, a great deal of goodwill. So it's actually both ways. We've, for Singapore, had requested, to purchase 2.5 million tablets of hydroxychloroquine, as many other countries have, which government of India has permitted. We've also worked with Singapore government and our own agencies to ensure that supply chains for essential items continue to work. As you know, for example, 30% of the rice consumed in Singapore comes from India. It's a fairly strong staple, not just for the Indian community. So there were disruptions of that nature, fruits and vegetables, marine products. These are sort of items which are fresh and required to be, transported very quickly. So these disruptions had to be addressed. So we've been partly involved in all of that and made sure these things work. On Singapore's side, I have to say that, they've been Temasek Foundation, which is a foundation run by Temasek, which is a sovereign wealth fund and a big investor in India, has provided kits for conducting 100,000 PCR
Yes.
tests in India, 70,000 of which was their donation, and 30,000 came through the Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation. The as far as the kits are concerned, I mean, since Singapore is essentially an international trading hub
Yeah.
with a very vast
Yeah.
network of suppliers for all kinds of products, and a very good, very deeply integrated with a global supply chain. So we've also tapped Government of India, looked at some Singapore-based companies as well for procurement of some of these essential medical supplies for combating COVID-19. And yes, we are involved in that process as well. And it's a complex exercise, as you can imagine. The entire world is chasing a few suppliers and few trading platforms. But to just get those things in time to India is a very huge priority for all of us here. And similarly, I think for from our perspective, the essential thing now is to make sure that we keep these supply lines working in both directions, even as both of us have varying degrees of lockdown.
You're talking about priority now. The conversation that Prime Minister Modi had with Prime Minister Lee Hsien-loong on, I think it was 23rd of
Yes.
April, and the assurances were given, what you were mentioning earlier, people who are laid off. The assurance was that all migrant workers would be treated on par with the Singapore nationals, and
Yes.
that went a long way in calming
Yes.
panic or tempers.
Yeah, I think that you have to commend what Singapore government has done. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong has publicly stated on a number of occasions that Singapore would treat foreign migrant workers in the same way as it would treat her own citizens, and that is something which they are following up on. As I said, they're working with employers to ensure that the workers get their salaries. They're also making arrangements at dormitories for remittance facilities, so that workers have you know uh, can regularly remit money back home. This is something which is a very important concern for them, since they can't go out to remittance facilities. As I said, they've even we work together to have messages delivered to workers, since they're mostly from Tamil Nadu, from icons like Rajnikant,
Yeah.
Sachin Tendulkar, Kamala Hassan, and Shankar Mahadevan. They are actually working with Walt Disney to provide free entertainment and educational content to the foreign workers. Their medical care is taken care of. We are also in conversation with with our Indian workers over here, and they feel pretty reassured about the treatment they're getting. There's been a very significant improvement in even the quality of food that is being given to them, which is actually of a very good standard. So all in all, yes, they are going out of their way. I mean, and as Prime Minister Lee said, that they have made a huge contribution in building Singapore into the country and the city that it is today. And so they want to make sure that they repay that gratitude by looking after the workers. There are, of course, a number of workers who have registered with us through Ministry of Manpower over here to return to India. They will be part of the evacuation process.
When you look at the overall picture of Singapore, as you pointed out earlier, another reason for why Singapore was that gold standard, as you pointed out, was that they were preparing for 17 years,
Yes.
like other countries, say
Yes.
South Korea or Taiwan, since SARS.
Yes.
There were also worries about, what we're calling the dormitories and the labor, the migrant labor who live in such cramped conditions. And there was that Little India riot in 2013. There was a lot of talk or debate about, modifying or reforming that whole. Did they lose a little bit in that sphere in terms of not looking at this area, considering the surge that has happened now?
Actually, there is a law. You're right. I mean, over a period of time, they've faced different kinds of challenges in dealing with foreign workers in Singapore. Remember, in taking all categories together, they constitute close to 18% of the resident population of this city, and that's a really large number.
It's
And they are
what
not just
1
in,
million of about 5.8 million population.
so that's about, we're looking at 941,000 to be precise currently, those who hold work pass or work permits, right? And they are across various sectors. Of course, the largest chunk would be in the construction sector, about one third of them, 330,000 or so. It's an important issue here in Singapore. And once this, infection spread, again, these issues have come to the forefront. But I'd say this, that they have a regulation which they constantly keep updating, both in terms of standards that have to be maintained and the services that have to be provided in these dormitories. Every experience leads them to try and make things better. The norms are very well laid out. They are, as a lot of people say, better than some of the international standards and norms. But a lot of people in Singapore say that they are not consistent with the standard of living that Singaporeans have, or as a country, as a first world. So this is a debate that is going on. They've already said that they are going to look at this afresh. And I must say that out of these 43 purpose-built dormitories, the owners of at least 20 of them have been fined in the recent past for violating the norms and that are laid down in the law relating to housing for foreign migrant workers. So there is a constant effort also to improve this, and I think this experience is going to go a long way in further improving the standards and living conditions and the entire organization of space and working processes for foreign workers over here.
I think your next appointment was announced maybe end February, and you'd probably even given one of your farewell interviews. But since then, you've been stuck dealing with the situation before you
Right,
moved to France.
right. No, yeah, that's true. I mean, we're all living in an uncertain times, uncertain world. I mean, if you look around the world, almost the entire world has come to a standstill. Uh, there is hardly a country in the world where people are not facing this abnormal situation of being at least frozen in their respective places, actually frozen in their homes. But we're here, as long as I'm here, I'll continue to be, of course, doing my duty. We're fortunate, as somewhat, I'd say, in Singapore to be living in conditions that are perhaps better than most other places. The circuit breaker measures aren't as stringent as there are in some other places, and we're all still able to come to office, as here in High Commission we are. I mean, at least the India-based offices and staff, we are able to come and work full time from our mission while observing, the requisite hygiene and physical distancing measures. And yes, I mean, we will this period of uncertainty, nobody knows how long it will last. There's a lot of debate going on in every country about this trade-off between life and livelihood, and when do they actually open and what do they need to get it going. But international travel, I think, will take a little longer to get
Yeah.
normalized because countries will need to work out protocols to ensure that there is no new wave of imports, as almost all countries have experienced as one of the triggers for the COVID-19. But I look forward to my next assignment, and I hope I can get there as soon as possible. But even more than that, we just hope that the world has a better future in the sense of the next couple of months, things look up for everyone in the world in terms of health and economy.
Hi, Commissioner Jawed Ashraf. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time when you have so much else to do. Stay safe. Hope the mission and all of you all the best. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, and to you too, stay safe and keep well. Thank you. Pleasure being on.